I want to invite you to do a thought experiment. In honor of Hanukkah, which begins this coming week, go home and find an old photograph, a photograph from 25 years ago that shows you lighting Hanukkah candles with your family from 25 years ago. Take an old photo and take a good long look. And my question is, how does that make you feel? For many of us, taking a look at a photograph from 25 years ago is complicated. On the one hand, there is a certain wistful beauty to looking at that photograph. Oh my God, our children were so cute, and they were so young, and they were so adorable, and they were so small. And oh my God, our parents were alive 25 years ago. And there were 3 generations lighting candles together. And oh my God, we were so much younger. And so there's a wistful beauty. And at the same time, there's also a wistful melancholy for many. It's not just that our kids were so much younger and smaller, but they actually were down the hall from us, and we could actually see them every day, and now we have to get on a plane, a train, or an automobile to see those kids. And our parents are gone. We don't have 3 generations like that lighting Hanukkah candles. And not only were we so much younger, we were so much healthier. That was before the back pain. That was before the hip pain. That was when I used to be able to run. That was when I used to be able to play tennis all the time. That was when climbing up and down stairs was a non-event. I didn't even think about it, I just did it. And so taking a good long look at an old photograph is a mixed bag. My father-in-law put it this way. He observed that there is no such thing as a happy picture. There are only pictures of happy memories. There is no such thing as a happy picture. There's only pictures of happy memories. There's pictures of happy memories because it is true, it was a blessing to be able to have 3 generations lighting Hanukkah candles together. But it's not an entirely happy picture today because in the intervening 25 years, we have experienced the ravages of time. So here's my question to you. Is there any inoculation against the ravages of time? Of course, frictions and conflicts happen. Of course, losses and struggles happen. That is part of the human condition. But is there some way to absorb the frictions and absorb the conflicts and absorb the losses and absorb the struggles and emerge not ravaged by time? Can we experience all of that complexity and emerge not ravaged by time? And our Torah has so much to teach us here. For the last few weeks, we've been reading Jacob's story. And today and for the next few weeks, we pivot to Joseph's story. But near the end of Joseph's story, Jacob makes a reappearance. And it is an older Jacob. And it is a Jacob who has been ravaged by time. I want to share with you 2 vignettes of Jacob. One, midlife, and one, ravaged by the end of his life. Midlife Jacob does not have it easy. Midlife Jacob has the opposite of easy. He has to deal with his brother Esau, who wants to kill him and brings 400 men, seemingly an army. Not easy. He gets through that. Can't breathe deeply because his daughter Dinah is raped. And then his sons visit violent revenge on the entire town. And then he can't rest easy. No sooner does that happen than his beloved Rachel dies in childbirth. And on top of all of that, as if that's not enough, don't forget he's moving. He's moving himself and 4 wives and 13 children and lots of cattle from Iraq to Israel. And moving is one of the great stressors in life then and now. And so he's got just a context of real challenge. And yet, his soul is healthy, and yet his soul is strong, and yet his attitude is robust and vigorous and positive and upbeat. And we know this from one particular moment. When his wife, Rachel, is dying in childbirth, and we know the whole story is about how much he loves Rachel. When she is dying in childbirth and gives birth right before she dies to a son, she says, I want to name this son Ben-Oni, the son of my sorrow. And Jacob overrules her and says, no, we're going to call him Benjamin, the son of my strength. Even with all that Jacob has been going through, Jacob intuits that the lens we live with determines how we live. Jacob knows that if our lens is sorrow, we see sorrow, and we live sorrow. And Jacob intuits that if our lens is strength, well, we see strength, and we live strength. And so mid-aged Jacob has it going on. And in the face of a challenge that's on a 1 to 10 is 100, he still is able to say, son of strength. Now, roll the film forward to the end of the Joseph story. Older Jacob. Well, whatever it was that he had, he lost. Because he has 2 conversations near the end of his life that show a soul in a very different place. First conversation is, he is reunited with Joseph. And you think this would be a bouquet of blessings. My son is alive. He's not only alive, he's thriving. He's number 2 in all of Egypt. And how cool is this? He's married. And how double cool is this? He has 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. I have grandsons. I didn't even know I had. Oh my God, I'm going to just catch up on life. But no, what's the first thing he says to Joseph? He says, now I can die. Not now I can live. Now I can die. And then he has a conversation with Pharaoh, who says, how old are you? And he says, I'm 130, and the years of my life have been ma'at v'ra'im, few and bad. So, something's going on that we need to explore here. Middle life Jacob has a really tough deal, and he's able to say, son of my strength. Older Jacob has all this blessing. He can't see it. He can't feel it. He can't live it. He can't see joy. He can't feel joy. He can't live joy. He's depleted. He is diminished by the ravages of time. So here's our question. How do we not get diminished by the ravages of time? How do we not do that? So, I heard a fabulous podcast where Andy Stanley, have I ever mentioned Andy Stanley? Andy Stanley was interviewing this guy named John Maxwell. So John Maxwell is the #1 leadership guru in America. He has written more than 70 books, and his more than 70 books have sold 35 million copies, and he's 77 years old. And John Maxwell said something, and it just pierced my soul. I said, this is it, this is it, this is it, what John Maxwell just said. Here's what he just said. He said, I do not believe in crossing the finish line. Because when you cross the finish line, you're finished. No finish lines in my life. No crossing, no finish lines in my life. I don't want to be finished. I want to be leaving it on the track field until the minute, until the second God calls me. I am against finish lines. And then Andy Stanley said to him, wow, you're 77. You've written 70 books. They've sold 35 million copies. You don't want a finish line. What's next? And he said, I want to start writing a whole new kind of book. All 70 books have been about leadership. I want to start writing books about personal growth. And in particular, I want to write 13 books on personal growth. Now, Andy Stanley doesn't ask John Maxwell, why 13? And John Maxwell doesn't say, why 13? But I've been thinking about it, and 13 is the whole thing. 13 is the key to everything he's suggesting. Why 13? 13 is such a large number, and he's 77. That means that as long as he lives, he's going to be engaged in activity that stretches him. He says, instead of a finish line, I want to wake up every morning and ask the question, what can I do to grow today? Want to wake up every morning, I'm 77, I want to wake up and ask myself, what can I do to learn today? And if he has to write 13 more books, he is always learning and always growing and always stretching. And 13 is a big enough book that he is going to be working on this forever. No finish lines. Now, I think these categories of no finish line because we're finished versus I'm going to wake up every morning and ask, what can I do to grow today and learn today and have fresh energy today? I'm 77 and I got to write 13 more books. I think that maps onto Jacob. Young Jacob, middle-aged Jacob, had it hard, but he was building and growing. What can I do today to build this family? Son of strength. Older Jacob felt that he was finished. And if you feel that you're finished, you're finished. If you feel that you're finished, you're finished. If you feel that you've crossed the finish line, then you're done. Now, I don't think that John Maxwell is saying never retire. I think he's saying never stop engaging in meaningful activity. It's not a call for a perpetual paycheck. It's a call for perpetual engagement in life. And for all of us, our version of 13 will be different. For some, 13 means developing a killer mahjong game and a killer bridge game. And for others, 13 means becoming a master knitter. By the way, I see people all the time in our synagogue coming together for mahjong and for bridge and for knitting. For some, 13 means I'm going to travel the way I never used to travel. For 13 means I'm going to learn the way I never used to learn. For some, 13 means I am going to read a book and read what I want to read, not what I have to read. And I've always read what I had to read, never what I want to read. Now, my reading selection is what I want to read. And for some means, 13 means I'm going to just be spending gobs of time with children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. Find 13 not about the paycheck. It's about I wake up, what do I get to do now. How do I get to grow now? Because here's the coda to the story. The coda to the story is that Jacob was not finished. He said he was finished when he was 130. Guess how long he lived for? 147. He left 17 good years on the table. Do we ever leave good years on the table? Do we ever leave good years on the table? We don't live them because we're just in a funk. We think we're finished, so we're finished, but we're actually not finished. Could have spent that time with his new grandchildren. His family was reunited. He thought he was finished, but he wasn't finished. How do we not do that? So, I think Jacob in his later years teaches us what not to do. And John Maxwell gives us an idea for how to not do what Jacob did in his last 17 years. He says every time he goes and does a conference and he meets with people, he asks them the following question. This is just so interesting. He asks them the question, what is the greatest life lesson that you have ever learned? And he says that 100% of the time, when he asks people, what's the greatest life lesson you've ever learned? 100% of the time, it always starts with a story of a setback, of a failure, of an adversity. The greatest life lesson I ever learned was when I was fired. I was fired. After all those years, they let me go, and I was ashamed. The greatest life lesson I ever learned was when my marriage broke apart. The greatest life lesson I ever learned was when I realized that I'm addicted to an unhealthy substance. And in all those cases, I learned something about myself and my character and life, and I emerged stronger. He says it never happens that somebody answers that question by saying, I was successful here, I was successful there, I was crushing it, and I learned a great life lesson. Life lessons always come from how we respond to our pain. So, if we find ourselves ever in the funk of Jacob's last 17 years, if we ever think we've crossed the finish line and so we're finished, but we're not, we have life to live, we don't want to leave it on the table, then we have to figure out what is the great life lesson, because the greatest life lessons come from how we process pain. And what is that life lesson that can allow us to emerge stronger and with more purpose? This coming Hanukkah, give yourself the best gift of all. No finish lines. Not finished. Never finished. What new gift, what new learning, what new energy, what new strength will you give to yourself and to the ones you love? Shabbat shalom. We can